Michael Sanderson stood in his backyard on a bright Saturday morning, sweat already forming on his brow despite the early hour. The rotting wooden fence that had separated his property from the empty lot behind it for the past 15 years was finally coming down. He gripped the sledgehammer tightly, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and trepidation as he swung it against the first post. The wood splintered with a satisfying crack. "About time," he muttered to himself, stepping back to survey his work. The fence had been an eyesore for years. Warped boards, missing slats, and posts that leaned precariously in every direction except straight up. Michael had been planning its removal since he'd inherited the house from his grandmother 3 years ago, but life had a way of pushing such projects to the bottom of the priority list. Between his promotion at the architectural firm and caring for his aging father, the fence had remained standing, a decaying reminder of tasks undone. Until today. What Michael didn't know as he continued dismantling the old fence was that he was being watched. From the second-story window of the newly constructed house across the vacant lot, a woman with perfectly highlighted blonde hair arranged in an immaculate bob observed his every move with narrowing eyes. Diane Holloway had moved into the upscale development just 6 weeks earlier. At 45, she was the president of her previous homeowners association and took great pride in maintaining what she called neighborhood standards. The shabby fence had been a point of contention from the moment she first toured the property, and she'd made several comments to her real estate agent about having it removed before she moved in. Somehow, that hadn't happened. As Michael worked, Diane's jaw tightened. This wasn't how she'd envisioned her Saturday morning. She planned to enjoy her coffee on her newly furnished patio while admiring the meticulous landscaping she paid premium prices to install. Instead, she was watching some man destroy what she had come to think of as her fence without so much as a courtesy notice. "Unbelievable," she whispered, setting down her coffee cup with enough force to slosh liquid onto her pristine granite countertop. "Who does he think he is?" Back in his yard, Michael was making good progress. Nearly half the fence was already dismantled, the rotted wood piled neatly to one side for proper disposal later. He paused to take a drink of water when a sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning air. "Excuse me, what exactly do you think you're doing?" Michael turned to find a woman standing at the edge of his property, designer sunglasses perched on her head, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was a mixture of indignation and disbelief, as though she'd caught him vandalizing a historic monument rather than removing his own dilapidated fence. "Good morning," Michael said, trying to keep his tone pleasant despite the confrontational approach. "Just taking down this old fence. It's seen better days." "You can't do that," the woman stated flatly. Michael blinked, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry. That fence serves as a property divide between our developments. You can't just remove it without proper authorization." Her voice carried the practiced authority of someone accustomed to having the final word. "I think there's been some misunderstanding," Michael said, setting down his sledgehammer. "This fence is entirely on my property. It was put up by my grandmother years ago. Well, it affects the aesthetic value of my home, and I wasn't notified of any demolition plans," she continued, stepping closer. "I'm Diane Holloway, by the way. I own the property behind yours." Michael glanced past her toward the new development. "Nice to meet you, but there's actually a vacant lot between us. I don't think we share a property line at all." Diane's expression hardened. "That vacant lot is part of our development's green space, and that fence has been establishing the boundary for years. You need to stop immediately, or I'll have no choice but to report this." As the words left her mouth, Michael felt the first stirrings of what would become a neighborhood saga unlike anything his quiet street had ever seen. Michael took a deep breath, reminding himself to remain calm. He dealt with difficult clients at the architectural firm before, but something about Diane's absolute certainty made his patience wear thin. "Look, Mrs. Holloway." "Ms.," she corrected sharply. "Ms. Holloway," Michael amended, "I appreciate your concern, but this fence is on my property. I have the survey documents inside if you'd like to see them." Diane's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her crossed arms. "Surveys can be inaccurate. Our homeowners association has strict guidelines about property modifications that affect neighboring aesthetics." "But you're not my neighbor," Michael pointed out, gesturing to the empty lot between their properties. "And I'm not part of your AOA." A flash of irritation crossed Diane's face. "That vacant lot is designated green space for our development. It's maintained by our association." Michael frowned. That didn't sound right. His grandmother had mentioned once that the lot had been for sale for years, but no one wanted to build there because of drainage issues. "Even if that's true, my fence doesn't border that lot. It's set back about 5 feet within my property line." He pointed to the old metal survey stake that was visible now that some of the fence had been removed. "See that marker? That's my actual property line." Diane barely glanced at it. "Those old markers don't mean anything. When our development was built, everything was reserved." By now, Michael's friendly demeanor was wearing thin. "I'm going to continue with my project. If you have concerns, I suggest you speak with your HOA president." Diane's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I am the HOA president." "Of course you are," Michael muttered under his breath. "What was that?" she demanded. "Nothing. Look, I'm going to continue working now." Michael turned back to the fence, picking up his sledgehammer again. He could feel Diane's eyes boring into his back, but chose to ignore her. After a moment, he heard her footsteps retreating, and he exhaled with relief. That relief was short-lived. 20 minutes later, as Michael was loading the broken fence pieces into his truck, a silver luxury SUV pulled up in front of his house. Diane emerged, phone pressed to her ear, and marched toward him with renewed purpose. "Yes, officer, I'm reporting destruction of property and potential boundary violation," she was saying loudly enough for Michael to hear. "The individual is continuing the destruction despite my warnings." Michael set down the boards he was carrying and wiped his hands on his jeans. This was getting ridiculous. "The address is 1487 Oakwood Lane," Diane continued, giving Michael a triumphant look. "Yes, I'll wait here until you arrive." She ended the call and crossed her arms again. "The police are on their way. I suggest you stop what you're doing immediately." Michael's next-door neighbor, Ellie Chen, an elderly woman who had lived beside his grandmother for decades, emerged from her house, concern etched on her face. "Everything okay, Michael?" she called out. "Just a misunderstanding, Mrs. Chen," he assured her, though his clenched jaw suggested otherwise. "Who's this woman?" Ellie asked, eyeing Diane suspiciously. "Ms. Holloway from the new development. She seems to think my fence belongs to her HOA." Ellie snorted. "That fence has been there since your grandmother built it in 1985. I helped her paint it." Diane stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is between me and this gentleman. Our homeowners association has strict—" "I don't care about your association," Ellie interrupted. "I've lived here 40 years. That fence belongs to the Sanderson family." Other neighbors began to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. The paddles from across the street wandered over, and shortly after, the Rodriguez family from 2 doors down joined the growing audience. Diane seemed momentarily taken aback by the gathering crowd, but quickly regained her composure. "I've already called the authorities. They'll sort this out." As if on cue, a police cruiser turned onto the street and pulled up beside Michael's truck. 2 officers stepped out, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a younger woman with a no-nonsense expression. "Afternoon, folks," the male officer said, approaching the group. "I'm Officer Daniels. This is Officer Rivera. We received a call about a property dispute." Diane immediately stepped forward. "Yes, officer. I'm Diane Holloway, president of the Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. This man is removing a boundary fence without proper authorization." Officer Rivera pulled out a notepad. "And you are, sir?" "Michael Sanderson. I own this property. The fence is mine, and it's entirely within my property line." Officer Daniels looked between them. "Do either of you have documentation to support your claims?" Officer Daniels spread the documents across the hood of the police cruiser, carefully comparing Michael's property survey with the development plans Diane had pulled up on her tablet. Officer Rivera stood beside him, occasionally asking questions and making notes. A small crowd of neighbors maintained a respectful distance, but their attention never wavered from the unfolding drama. According to these documents, Officer Daniels said after several minutes of review, the property line is clearly marked by these survey stakes. He pointed to Michael's survey, then looked up at the metal stake visible where part of the fence had been removed. "That matches what we're seeing here." Diane leaned forward, jabbing her finger at her development plans. "But our HOA documents clearly show the green space extending to the fence line. It's been that way since the development was approved 3 years ago." Officer Rivera looked up from her notepad. "Ms. Holloway, the original property survey from 1980 and the updated one from 2018 both indicate that Mr. Sanderson's property extends 5 feet beyond the fence line. The fence itself is fully within his property." "That's impossible," Diane insisted, her voice rising slightly. "When I purchased my home, the realtor specifically told me." "Realtors aren't surveyors, ma'am," Officer Daniels interrupted gently. Michael, who had been quietly watching the exchange, cleared his throat. "Officer, I found something else that might help." He held up an old, slightly yellowed document. "This is the permit my grandmother filed with the city when she built the fence in 1985. It clearly states the fence was set 5 feet inside her property line to allow room for her garden." Officer Rivera took the document, examined it, and nodded. "This confirms what the surveys show." Diane's face flushed red. "This is absurd. Our development invested thousands in landscaping that green space based on the understanding that the fence marked the boundary. That would be an issue between your HOA and whoever sold you the development rights," Officer Daniels explained. but legally speaking, Mr. Sanderson has every right to remove his fence. The murmurs from the watching neighbors grew louder. Ellie Chen didn't bother hiding her satisfied smile. "I don't accept this," Diane declared, straightening her posture. "There must be some mistake. I want to speak with your supervisor." Officer Rivera's expression remained professionally neutral, but a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth betrayed her feelings. "You're welcome to do that, ma'am, but it won't change the property lines. These surveys are legally binding documents." Michael, sensing Diane's growing agitation, decided to offer an olive branch. "Ms. Holloway, I understand this is unexpected. If you'd like, we could discuss installing a new fence along the actual property line once I've cleared the old one. I'd be willing to split the cost." Diane turned to him with such ferocity that he instinctively took a step back. "Don't patronize me," she snapped. "I've dealt with property disputes before and I know my rights. Your grandmother probably moved those survey stakes years ago to steal land from the previous owner." A collective gasp rose from the neighbors. Ellie Chen stepped forward, her small frame vibrating with indignation. "Margaret Sanderson was the most honest person I ever knew," she said, her voice quavering with emotion. "She would never do such a thing." Officer Daniels raised his hands. "Let's all stay calm. Ms. Holloway, I strongly advise against making accusations without evidence." "Evidence?" Diane scoffed. "Look at this neighborhood. These old houses, that overgrown lot, do you really think people here maintain proper records? Our development has state-of-the-art mapping and planning. Our documents were prepared by professionals." Michael felt his patience finally snap. "Your documents are wrong," he said flatly, "and I'd appreciate it if you'd stop insulting my grandmother and my neighbors." "I'm just stating facts," Dan retorted. "Property values in this area have been stagnant for years until our development arrived. You should be thanking us for improving your neighborhood, not creating problems over an eyesore fence." The crowd's murmurs turned distinctly hostile. The Rodriguez family's teenage son let out a low "hoo" that would have been comical in any other situation. Officer Rivera stepped between Michael and Diane. "Okay, that's enough. Here's what's going to happen. Mr. Sanderson has the legal right to remove his fence. Ms. Holloway, if your HOA believes there's been an error in the property designation, you'll..." For precisely 3 seconds, silence reigned over the gathered crowd. Then, like a volcano that had been building pressure for decades, Diane Holloway erupted. "This is absurd," she shrieked, her perfectly highlighted bob bouncing with each syllable. "I paid a premium for a property backing up to green space. My realtor walked the property line with me." The brochure specifically stated. "Ma'am," Officer Rivera interjected firmly, "your dispute is with your realtor or developer, not Mr. Sanderson." Michael watched as Diane's carefully constructed worldview crumbled in real time. Her face cycled through an impressive spectrum of reds, her designer sunglasses slipping unnoticed from her head to the ground. "No, no, no." She fumbled with her phone, fingers trembling as she pulled up her email. "I have the marketing materials right here. Willowbrook Estates, luxury homes backing to preserved green space, C. She thrust her phone toward Officer Daniels, who glanced at it with professional detachment. "Again, ma'am, it would be a civil matter between you and the developer." Diane spun around, addressing the gathered neighbors as if they were a jury. "Do you understand what this means? They lied to us, to all 38 homeowners. We paid an average of $70,000 more per lot for green space views." The Rodriguez family's teenage son whispered loudly to his sister, "This is better than Netflix." His mother shushed him, but not before several neighbors chuckled. Diane whirled toward the sound, her eyes wild. "You think this is funny? Property fraud is a serious crime. When I'm finished with them, that development company will." Her tirade was interrupted by the arrival of a sleek black Tesla pulling up beside the police cruiser. A middle-aged man in golf attire stepped out looking confused. "Diane, what's going on?" "The Hendersons said you were having some kind of confrontation with the police." Diane's expression shifted instantly from rage to vindication. "Robert, thank God you're here. These people are trying to tell me that our green space isn't even part of our development. Can you believe it?" The man, presumably Robert, approached cautiously, assessing the scene with the wariness of someone who had witnessed Diane's outbursts before. "I'm Robert Holloway, Diane's husband." He introduced himself to the officers. "What seems to be the problem here?" Officer Daniels briefly explained the situation while Diane paced behind her husband, occasionally interjecting with increasingly dramatic proclamations about fraud and deceit. Robert listened carefully, then sighed heavily. "Officer, I see these documents myself." After reviewing the surveys and permits, Robert rubbed his forehead. "Diane, they're right. Look at the dates on these surveys. The fence is clearly on Mr. Sanderson's property, and that vacant lot isn't ours." "At 2, Robert," Diane gasped, genuinely shocked by his betrayal. "After we spent $800,000 on the house, You're just going to roll over. It's not about rolling over, it's about facts, Robert replied, his patience clearly well practiced. We need to take this up with Willowbrook Development, not cause a scene in someone else's yard. Someone else's, Diane sputtered, then suddenly stopped as a new thought struck her. Her eyes narrowed as she turned back to Michael. What are you planning to do with this property once the fence is removed? Michael, caught off guard by the sudden shift, shrugged. Clean it up. Maybe plant some native wildflowers along the back. Why? Because, Diane said, her voice dropping to an ominous tone, if you think you can use this situation to try to force our HOA to buy this strip of land at an inflated price, you've got another thing coming. Several neighbors gasped at the accusation. Michael stared at her in disbelief. I'm not trying to sell anything. I just want to remove my rotting fence. The likely story, Diane scoffed. You probably found out about the property line discrepancy and saw dollar signs. Well, I've dealt with opportunists before and… Diane, that's enough. Robert interrupted sharply. The force of his tone suggested this wasn't the first time he'd had to rein in his wife's runaway accusations. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself. I'm protecting our investment. Someone has to take a stand here. Officer Rivera closed her notebook. Miss Holloway, we've established that no crime is being committed. Mr. Sanderson is within his rights to remove his fence. I suggest you take your concerns to your developer or consider consulting a civil attorney. Oh, I'll be consulting attorneys, all right, Diane declared. Multiple attorneys, specialized in real estate fraud, class action lawsuits, and consumer protection. Robert placed a gentle but firm hand on his wife's shoulder. Let's go home and discuss this privately. 3 weeks had passed since the fence confrontation, and Michael was enjoying his Sunday morning coffee on his newly built back deck. Where the rotting fence once stood, there was now an attractive rock garden with native wildflowers beginning to bloom. He gazed across the vacant lot toward the Willowbrook Estates development, where a flurry of unusual activity had been taking place for days. His phone buzzed with a text from Ellie Chen. Turn on Channel 7 News right now. Curious, Michael went inside and switched on his television. The local news anchor's voice filled the room. Continuing our top story this morning, residents of the upscale Willowbrook Estates development are in an uproar following revelations that the developer misrepresented property boundaries and green space allocations. A class action lawsuit has been filed against Cedar Mills Development Corporation, with homeowners claiming they were charged premium prices for lots supposedly backing up to protected green space. The camera cut to a familiar face, Robert Holloway, looking somber in a business suit. We purchased these homes in good faith, believing the marketing materials that promised to preserve natural areas behind our properties, he stated. Instead, we discovered that the supposed green space is actually privately owned land that could be developed at any time. Michael nearly choked on his coffee when the camera panned to reveal Diane Holloway standing beside her husband, her expression carefully composed into one of dignified outrage. Gone was the shrieking woman from his yard. In her place stood a polished, media-ready spokesperson. We're not just fighting for ourselves, Diane told the reporter, her voice steady and reasonable. We're standing up for consumer protection and truth in real estate marketing. 38 families have been affected by these misrepresentations. Michael shook his head in disbelief. Hurricane Diane had apparently channeled her fury into organized action. The doorbell rang, interrupting the news segment. Michael opened his front door to find Robert Holloway standing on his porch, looking slightly uncomfortable. Mr. Sanderson, do you have a moment? Michael stepped aside, allowing Robert to enter. Come in. I was just watching you and your wife on the news. Robert winced slightly. Yes, well, Diane has certainly found her calling as the face in our lawsuit. May we sit down? I have a proposition for you. In the living room, Robert got straight to the point. After our unfortunate first meeting, I took the liberty of researching the vacant lot between our properties. It's owned by Cedar Mills Development, the same company that built our neighborhood. I gathered that from the news report, Michael replied. What you might not know is that Cedar Mills is trying to sell that lot to a commercial developer for a small strip mall. That's why they never incorporated it into our green space as promised. They were planning to cash in on it all along. Michael frowned. A strip mall? That would change the character of the whole area. Exactly, Robert agreed. Diane may have approached things poorly initially, but she was right about one thing. This affects both our communities. What are you proposing? Michael asked, intrigued despite his lingering wariness of anything connected to Diane Holloway. Our homeowners association has raised funds to make an offer on the vacant lot, but we're still short. We'd like to propose a joint venture between Willowbrook Estates and your neighborhood to purchase the lot and maintain it as an actual green space, a small nature park that would benefit both communities. Michael raised an eyebrow. And Diane is on board with this. Working with the neighborhood she was disparaging a few weeks ago. Robert's mouth twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. Let's just say that Diane has redirected her. considerable energy toward the developer, and the publicity from our lawsuit has been effective. Cedar Mills stock dropped 15% last week. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Michael opened it to find Ellie Chen and several other neighbors on his porch. "We saw the news," Ellie explained. "Then we saw Mr. Holloway come here. We thought we should be part of any discussion that affects our neighborhood." Soon, Michael's living room was filled with neighbors from both communities, including, to everyone's surprise, Diane Holloway herself, who entered with the purposeful stride of a general arriving to command troops. "Mr. Sanderson," she said, extending her hand with businesslike efficiency, "I believe we got off on the wrong foot." The understatement was so profound that several people coughed to hide their laughter. "That's one way to put it," Michael replied, accepting her handshake cautiously.